Now we're going to look at sanitary appliances and pipe sizes. So the key objectives for this part of the session, I want you all to be able to state the pipe sizes for all of the key sanitary appliances, recognise the different gratings, sometimes known as waste fittings, waste connections, and explain what situation each might be used in. I also want you to be able to recognise and label sanitary appliances. So there's lots of different types of sanitary appliances, and the key similarity is that they all remove wastewater. They can be made from lots of different materials. They might be made from ceramic. Most of this, what we describe as sanitary ware, the stuff that goes in the bathroom, would be made from ceramic. But you might also sort of find some things made out of fire clay, for example, some shower trays, or stainless steel, for example, for a lot of the kitchen sinks. Another example of fire clay could be our old butler style sinks, like the London sink or the Belfast sink, or cast iron. Old baths were often made out of cast iron, as well as potentially steel or plastic or even fiberglass. A lot of modern baths are made out of sort of plastic coated fiberglass. Yeah, so there's lots of different materials that we might use, and lots of different appliances that we need to be aware of. The key appliances we need to be aware of are the basin, and the basin is what you'd find in the bathroom. The sink is what you'd find in the kitchen, so just make sure we get that there's a clear distinction between them from the start. Toilets, bidets, shower trays, baths, kitchen sinks, waste disposal units, washing machines, dishwashers, and macerators as well, which are another sort of type of toilet which we're going to discuss later on. So we're going to look briefly at these all later on. So the key pipe sizes of our waste pipe work are 32mm, 40mm and 110mm. Almost all of our appliances will be attached to one of these three pipe sizes. There's only one that's generally going to be connected to 110mm, and that would be a toilet. Though the minimum size connection, if you only had one toilet connected on the run, you could connect it to a pipe size with a minimum diameter of 75mm. Okay, that pipe should be at least the same diameter as the outlet of the toilet. So if the toilet had a 90mm outlet, for example, the sort of smallest pipe you could fit would be 90mm. Okay. Shower trays, baths, kitchen sinks, etc., etc. So basically everything, with the exception of basins and bidets and single bowl urinals, would be connected to a 40mm pipe, an inch and a half pipe, most people would call it. Okay, but a 40mm pipe. And our basins, bidets, and single bowl urinals would be connected to a 32mm pipe, inch and quarter. Right. You can split basins into some broad categories. Basins, as I've said, are what would be fitted in the bathroom. They can be either fixed to the wall, like a wall-hung basin or a pedestal basin here, or they can be countertop basins, and that the countertop basins could be semi-countertop, under countertop, or countertop, and it literally just describes the position in relation to the countertop. Semi-countertop basin is half in the countertop, and under countertop basin would be under the countertop, and a countertop basin would have the top projecting up over the countertop and maybe have the edges supported by the countertop. Okay, lots of different types of kitchen sinks as well. Like I've said previously, you can get the sort of Belfast sinks, the London sinks, these big chunky sort of fire clay sinks, but you also get these plastic sinks as well, and stainless steel sinks, which tend to be sort of more commonly fitted these days. Sometimes they'll have a specific side. They can be left or right hand drainers. Sometimes you get ones that are universal, and they'll have like blanking plugs, which can be used to sort of blank off any sort of holes. But there are other times where you need to be very specific and make sure that you purchase the right sized drainer for the installation that you're carrying out. Okay. So waste connections or gratings, there's different types of these. On sort of plastic basins and kitchen sinks, you're probably going to have a combined waste and overflow. Also on baths as well. A lot of the time on baths you're going to have a combined waste and overflow, and that's where your sort of overflow is built in and on the outside to the grating. Combined waste sometimes will have a pop-up plug. You can adjust the height of the pop-up plug by using the screw at the bottom of the pop-up to adjust the height. So obviously check the height's correct after completing the installation, because if it's not set correctly, the appliance either won't seal or it will drain very slowly, and you might get a call back with people thinking that it's been blocked. Most basins have integral overflows. These are overflows that are built into the basin themselves. You can see in this top picture here, there's a channel inside the basin which allows any water which fills up the basin to overflow into. You need to be quite careful that you use the correct type of grating or waste fitting, whatever you want to call it. When you install these, you must fit something that's called the slotted waste or slotted grating to allow that water to flow into the grating, into the waste, if the appliance overflows. Okay, if there is no integral overflow, you'd use an unslotted waste, for example, like on a shower tray and occasionally on some basins. Worth noting that with relation to shower trays in particular and baths as well, you need to make sure that you install the appliance in a place where you will be able to gain access to the grating, to install the pipe to it and do whatever else you might need to do, for example, clean out a blockage or whatever in the future. Look now very briefly at food waste disposal units. They're normally fitted under kitchen sinks. Sometimes people might call them an incinerator. That's a brand name. And what they do is they basically sort of blend up any refuse, like any vegetable peelings, tea bags, etc. And you can then pump that into the drainage pipe, essentially. They need a slightly bigger grating than normal, and some manufacturers will produce sink tops to suit this. Okay, and they could be connected. They would be connected to a 40mm pipe, just like the kitchen sink, essentially. So you have to make sure that the unit's connected via a fuse switch spur, and you'd isolate that at the fuse switch spur and remove the fuse if you ever wanted to maintain the appliance. You'd be connected with a P-trap. The reason for that is bottle traps are subject to blockage. They kind of block up quite quickly and quite easily. So the best trap to use for a kitchen sink, particularly if it's got a waste disposal unit fitted, would be a P-trap. Okay, it should have a special tool to move the blades from underneath in case there's some sort of blockage there. Excuse me. And it would have a cut-off device as well. Something we'd look at in a lot more detail at level 3 if you did it. Okay. Yeah, there's also macerators we need to be aware of. Macerators work just the same way as a food waste disposal unit. They've got blades in there that will cut up any waste that goes into them, and then they also have a pump on it which would pump the waste to wherever it needs to go, essentially. And this is quite good to be used in places where you might be quite inaccessible, or potentially if you wanted to fit a toilet in a basement that's below the drainage pipe work, you could then use a macerator to pump that waste up, and then it could then flow into the drainage pipe. Again, it's something we'd look at in a bit more detail at level 3, and it is worth noting for the test but they must not be the only type of toilet installed in the property, because if there was a power cut, there would be no means of removing the waste, which would obviously be a bit of a disaster. Okay, so to reduce the risk of them accidentally being turned off, they would be connected to the mains via an unswitched fuse spur. And again, you'd isolate, and if you were going to work on this appliance, you'd isolate the appliance at the fuse, take it out, carry out your safe isolation procedures, check that it's dead essentially, and retain the fuse whilst you carried out the work. So there's different types of pans. So we've looked at macerators which would be potentially connected onto pans at the back of pans, but there's different types of toilet pans. The most common type is the wash down pan, and that literally, the force of the water goes into the pan and forces the contents of the pan out through, essentially through momentum. So that's the wash down type pan, and it looks like this. A single trap siphonic has a sort of thinner connection at the back, and essentially the water would fill up, and then when the water starts to overflow, it would pull the contents of the pan and majority of the rest of the water through and into the drains through siphonic action. It's quieter than a wash down pan. A double trap siphonic essentially just does the same thing, but it has two traps. Okay, so how the water gets to the pan can differ as well. You can have high level cisterns, which would be connected high up, low level cisterns, which would be fitted a bit lower, and close coupled cisterns, which would be connected directly straight onto the top of the pan. As you might already know, the height of the cistern, or the height of the water above the appliance, is going to affect the pressure that comes out. So the higher the cistern, the faster the water is going to flow out, and the more quickly and more effectively it can wash through whatever's in the pan, essentially. Okay. So as well as siphonic pans, there's also flushing mechanisms that can be considered as siphonic. A good thing about these is they pull that water up a little bit higher before it starts to flow out, and so it actually sort of slightly increases the pressure and ensures an even pressure throughout the duration of the flush as well, which is good, you know. So there's other ways of flushing as well. More commonly, we use a drop valve these days, and all of these would be fixed onto the fitting. This is a drop valve just here. All of these would be fixed into the cistern using nuts and rubber washers. Okay. Worth noting, the maximum flush for any property, any new installation, would be 6 litres, and it would have a reduced flush. It should also have a facility for reduced flush, normally 2 buttons you'll see on most pans, which would flush it not more than 4 litres. Okay, so bidets now we're going to look at. 2 main types of bidets. There's the over-the-rim bidet that you can see up here, and the ascending spray bidet, which you can see here. The over-the-rim bidet projects the water out from above the rim, which means it's sort of safe from the category 5 risk that you'd have in the bowl in terms of water categories. And the ascending spray bidet, you need to be very, very careful with, because the water is spray up and the outlet is inside the bowl, so therefore there's a risk of category 5 water being drawn back into the system, and you need to be very, very careful with how you install these. These are an appliance. If you install these, you should tell the water authority that you're going to install them before you install it, and then send someone out to check it's been installed correctly if you ever do install them. Alrighty, so now it's time for your task.